The wind cut through the empty alleyways of downtown Atlanta like a knife. Neon lights flickered above piles of damp, cardboard boxes, home to two souls the city had forgotten. Malik and Marcus, 17-year-old twins, huddled together under a torn blanket behind a closed diner. Their breath turned to mist in the freezing air, but they held on to each other, whispering stories to keep the night from swallowing them whole. "Tomorrow's gonna be better, bro," Malik said, his voice trembling. "Maybe we'll find work. Maybe someone will see us." Marcus forced a smile. "Yeah, maybe God's got us next on the list." They laughed quietly, not because anything was funny, but because it was the only way to stay human. The world had taken everything. Their parents, their home, their school, their future, but it hadn't taken their kindness. As dawn began to break, the twins wandered toward Peachtree Street, hoping to find leftover food outside cafes. The city was just waking, cars honking, people rushing, the smell of roasted coffee filling the air. That's when Marcus noticed something near a luxury black Mercedes parked by the curb, a wallet. Thick and expensive looking, lying half hidden under a puddle. "Yo, Malik, look at that," Marcus whispered, eyes wide. He picked it up carefully, shaking off the rain. Inside was a platinum card, several $100 bills, and a driver's license. The name read, Jonathan E. Carter. Malik's hands trembled. "Bro, this guy's rich. Real rich." Marcus opened the wallet further and saw a photo of a smiling man with two kids. "He's got a family." They stared at each other. For two boys who hadn't eaten in 2 days, the temptation was real. A few $100s could mean food, shelter, survival. But after a moment of silence, Malik said quietly, "It ain't ours. We give it back." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, Mama always said, even when the world's cold, don't let your heart freeze." They cleaned the wallet with their torn sleeve, wrapped it in plastic from a trash bag, and began walking. Hungry, tired, but guided by something purer than luck, conscience. They didn't know the man who had dropped it was one of Atlanta's most powerful billionaires, and that this small act of honesty would soon change their lives forever. The city came alive as Malik and Marcus wandered through the crowded streets, clutching the wallet like it was a sacred duty. The morning rush was a blur of expensive coats and polished shoes. People who didn't see them, people who didn't want to. "Bro, you think this Mr. Carter even gonna care?" Marcus asked, eyeing a passing bus filled with office workers. Malik shrugged. "Doesn't matter if he cares, we do." They walked into a corner store to ask for help, but the clerk's eyes narrowed the moment he saw their tattered clothes. "We don't allow loitering," the man snapped, waving them off. Marcus raised his hands. "We ain't stealing, man. We just need to find this person, Jonathan Carter." The clerk frowned but leaned closer, glancing at the name on the ID. His expression changed slightly. "You mean the Jonathan Carter? Carter Industries?" Malik blinked. "Industries like factories and stuff?" The man gave a dry laugh. "Like half this city's jobs, kid. He's one of the richest men in Georgia." The twins exchanged stunned looks. They had found a billionaire's wallet. Outside, they debated what to do. The license had an address, a mansion on the north side, but that was miles away. Walking there would take half the day. And they hadn't eaten in almost 40 hours. Marcus rubbed his stomach. "I'm starving, bro." "We could just take one bill. Just one." Malik looked down at the wallet, then at his brother. "If we take it, it means we don't believe God watching. We'll make it somehow." Marcus sighed, ashamed but proud of his brother's strength. They started walking north. Each step was heavy, their shoes soaked, their stomachs growling. They passed food trucks and bakeries, the scent of fresh bread torturing them. Once Malik nearly fainted from hunger, but Marcus caught him. Hey, keep walking, man. We're almost there." After hours under the sun, the skyline began to fade behind them. Wide roads, clean lawns, and iron gates appeared, a world they'd only seen in magazines. Finally, they reached the massive gates of Carter Estate. Marble lions guarded the entrance, and security cameras followed their every move. Marcus hesitated. "We don't belong here." Malik straightened his back. "We belong wherever honesty takes us." He pressed the intercom button. Static crackled, then a voice said, "Carter residence. State your business." Malik took a deep breath. Sir, we found Mr. Carter's wallet. We came to return it." There was silence, then a click. Moments later, the massive gates began to swing open. They had no idea that behind those doors waited a man whose life was about to be shaken to its core. The gates creaked open with a deep metallic groan, revealing a driveway so long it could have been its own street. A line of marble fountains shimmered in the sunlight, and at the end stood a mansion so enormous it made the twins stop in disbelief. "Man," Marcus whispered, "this ain't no house. That's a whole kingdom." Malik chuckled softly. "And we're the messengers at the gate." They hesitated, then stepped forward. Their shoes left muddy prints on the polished stone path, and for a moment they both felt small, like two forgotten pieces of a puzzle that didn't belong. As they neared the entrance, two security guards approached quickly. "Hey, you kids can't be here," one barked. "This is private property." Malik raised his hands nervously. We ain't here for trouble, sir. We found this." He held up the wallet with both hands. The second guard frowned, took it, and flipped it open. "This is Mr. Carter's," he muttered, looking at the boys with surprise. "Where'd you find it?" "Downtown," Marcus replied. "Near a Mercedes. We just wanted to give it back." The first guard radioed something. Moments later, a sleek golf cart appeared, driven by a man in a gray suit. "Bring them," he said curtly. "Mr. Carter wants to see who found it." The twins exchanged nervous glances as they climbed onto the back of the cart. The ride up the driveway felt endless, every turn revealing more beauty, trimmed gardens, statues, even a lake reflecting the morning sky. Inside the mansion, marble floors gleamed under chandeliers. A maid looked up, startled by the sight of two dirty, shivering boys standing in the hall. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. Then, down the staircase came Jonathan E. Carter himself, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a dark suit that looked like it cost more than their entire neighborhood once had. His eyes were sharp but kind, the kind of eyes that had seen both success and sorrow. He looked at the boys silently as his assistant handed him the wallet. Opening it, he saw everything inside, untouched. The bills, the cards, the photos, all exactly where he left them. "You found this downtown?" Carter asked. His voice was calm, but there was something behind it. Disbelief, maybe admiration. "Yes, sir," Malik said softly. "Didn't want nobody else to take it." Carter stared at them for a long moment. Finally, he said quietly, "You walked all the way here?" Marcus nodded. "We ain't got no bus money, sir." The billionaire exhaled deeply and gestured toward the dining room. "Come inside. You both look like you haven't eaten in days." The twins hesitated, but Carter smiled, the first real warmth they'd seen in months. "Please," he said. "It's the least I can do." And just like that, the doors of fortune opened wider than they ever dreamed possible. The smell of warm food hit them before they even reached the dining hall. Roasted chicken, buttered bread, mashed potatoes, and a faint sweetness of apple pie filled the air. For two boys who had spent nights surviving on stale crusts and water, the sight was almost unreal. Malik froze at the door, unsure whether to step in. "Bro, you sure this is okay?" Marcus whispered back. "Man, I don't care if it's a dream. I'm eating before I wake up." Jonathan Carter smiled faintly as he gestured for them to sit. "Please, you did something most grown men wouldn't have done. Eat. There's plenty." The twins sat hesitantly at the end of the long mahogany table, trying not to stare at the chandeliers or the golden dishes. When the food was served, they ate quietly at first, small bites, polite, careful. But hunger soon took over, and they couldn't help themselves. Carter watched, not with judgment, but with a deep sadness in his eyes. After a while, he spoke. "How long have you boys been on the streets?" Malik wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Since our mama passed, 2 years now." "And your father?" "Never met him," Marcus said softly. "Mama used to say he left before we were born. She worked 2 jobs till she got sick." Carter nodded slowly, his expression tightening. Something in their story seemed to cut through him. He took a deep breath. "You remind me of my sons," he said finally. "Except, they've never known hunger a day in their lives." There was silence. The boys looked up, unsure what to say. Malik finally murmured, "Your sons are lucky, sir." Carter gave a small, distant smile. "Maybe, but luck doesn't always teach the right lessons." The billionaire's assistant, a woman named Grace, entered quietly. "Mr. Carter, the afternoon meeting has been postponed." He nodded. "Good. Tell them I'll be busy." Turning back to the twins, Carter leaned forward. "You returned something most people would have kept. That tells me who you are. But tell me, what do you want? Food, shelter, money?" Malik and Marcus exchanged glances. Marcus said softly, "We just want a chance, sir. A place to start again. Somewhere we don't gotta sleep with one eye open." Carter looked at them for a long moment, then stood. "Then you'll stay here tonight. I'll have the guest house prepared." The twins' eyes widened. "You mean here?" He smiled warmly. "Yes, and tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." As they followed Grace toward the guest quarters, Malik whispered, "You think he really gonna help us?" Marcus smiled for the first time in months. He already did, bro. Outside, the winter wind howled against the mansion walls. But for the first time in years, the twins fell asleep on soft beds, full and safe. They didn't know that Carter would lie awake that night, staring at their mother's photo, a secret that would soon break everything open. Long after the twins had fallen asleep in the guest house, Jonathan Carter sat alone in his study. The fire crackled softly, casting long shadows across the mahogany shelves filled with old books and framed memories. The wallet, the one the boys had returned, rested on his desk, beside a half-empty glass of whiskey. He opened it again, not to check the cash or cards, but to stare at the small photo tucked inside. His two sons, smiling in their crisp private school uniforms. They were the same age as Malik and Marcus, yet their eyes didn't hold the same strength. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Something about those twins had shaken him. The honesty, the way they looked at the world. Despite having nothing, it reminded him of someone he hadn't thought of in years. He stood, walked to a locked drawer, and pulled out an old photo album covered in dust. Inside were pictures from a time before he was Mr. Carter, the billionaire. There she was, Elena James, the woman he'd loved more than anyone, long before success had consumed him. Her smile was soft, her eyes warm. The same eyes Malik had. His hand trembled as he flipped through more pictures. There was one that made his breath hitch. Elena, standing outside a small apartment, visibly pregnant. Written in faded pen on the back, "For Jonathan, I'll always keep them safe." He stared at the photo for a long time, the realization hitting like thunder. The twins, those two boys, had her eyes, her voice, even her gentle way of speaking. Could it be? He sank into the leather chair, heart pounding. He had left Elena years ago to chase ambition, telling himself he'd come back once he made it. But when he did, she was gone. No records, no forwarding address. He'd searched for a while, then buried the guilt under work, money, and noise. Now fate had dragged her sons to his doorstep, hungry, homeless, and honest. Carter clenched the photograph in his hand. "My God," he whispered. "What have I done?" The next morning, when the twins woke to the smell of breakfast, Carter was already waiting in the garden. His eyes were red but kind. "Morning, boys," he greeted softly. "Sleep well?" "Yes, sir," Malik said, smiling. "Best sleep we had in years." Carter studied them, every feature, every gesture. "Good," he said quietly. "Because today, I need to ask you something important." The twins looked at each other, confused. "Ask what, sir?" Carter's voice trembled slightly. "Tell me, do you know your mother's name?" The world seemed to pause. Malik blinked. "Yeah, Elena James, why?" Carter felt the ground shift beneath him. He managed a weak smile, his heart breaking and healing all at once. "No reason," he whispered. "Just a name I used to know very well." Jonathan Carter could barely keep his composure as the name Elena James echoed in his mind. Every memory of her, the laughter, the promises, the way she used to say, "You'll change the world, John. But don't let the world change you," came rushing back like a flood. He had let the world change him. He had traded love for success, family for fortune, and now that past stood before him, alive and unaware. Malik and Marcus sat across from him at the garden table, eating pancakes with grateful smiles. They had no idea the man watching them with tearful eyes might be their father. "Sir?" Marcus asked, noticing Carter's silence. "You okay?" Carter blinked, forcing a smile. "Yes, son." He caught himself, clearing his throat. "Yes, I'm fine. Just thinking." He tried to steady his voice, but the word son had already slipped out, burning his throat. Grace, his assistant, approached quietly with coffee, sensing something heavy in the air. Carter waved her off gently. When the twins were done eating, Carter stood. "I have a meeting today, but when I get back, I'd like to talk more. About your mother. And about what comes next for you, too." Marcus grinned. "We're not going back to the streets, right?" Carter smiled softly. "Not if I can help it." As the boys followed Grace toward the backyard to see the guest house garden, Carter turned away, gripping the photo in his pocket. His hands trembled. "How do I tell them?" he thought. "How do I tell them that the man who abandoned their mother is the one they just saved?" Hours later, in his office downtown, Carter sat in front of his lawyer, distracted. "Jonathan," the lawyer said, "we need your signature for the charity contracts." Carter didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere. Finally, he spoke. "Thomas, if I found children that might be mine, after years, what would I even do?" The lawyer frowned. "That depends. Do you know they're yours?" Carter looked out the window. "Not yet, but my heart does." That evening, he returned home just before sunset. The twins were sitting by the pond, skipping stones. Their laughter echoed through the garden, pure, innocent, the kind he hadn't heard in years. He approached slowly. "Boys," he said gently, "may I join you?" "Of course, sir," Malik said. "You ever skip a rock before?" Carter chuckled. "Once or twice." They spent the next few minutes talking, laughing, and for the first time in a long while, Carter felt something deeper than wealth, belonging. When the sky turned gold and pink, Malik asked, "Sir, why'd you help us? You didn't even know us." Carter looked at him, his voice quiet but heavy. "Because sometimes, strangers are closer to us than we ever realize." That night, after the twins went inside, Carter made a decision. He called Grace into his study. "Get me a DNA test," he said, his voice breaking. "Quietly. I need to know the truth." Morning sunlight streamed through the mansion windows, but Jonathan Carter had barely slept. The thought of Elena's twins haunted every hour of the night. What if the boys were truly his? What if the woman he had once loved had raised his sons alone, suffering in silence while he built an empire on regret? Grace knocked softly and entered the study. "Sir, I arranged the test. Discreetly, as you asked. I told the lab it's for a personal family matter." Carter nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Good, thank you, Grace." She hesitated, then said gently, "If they are yours, what will you do?" He stared out the window toward the guest house, where the twins were playing basketball with a gardener. "What any father should have done long ago," he whispered. "Make it right." Later that afternoon, Carter invited Malik and Marcus into his office. They looked a little nervous. The mansion still felt too big, too clean, too unreal. "Come in, boys," Carter said kindly. "I wanted to talk." Marcus smiled awkwardly. "We didn't break nothing, promise." Carter laughed softly. "No, you didn't. I just need your help with something. Personal." He handed them small plastic swabs. "It's a quick test, nothing scary. Just to check for, a family connection." "I have a feeling about something." The twins looked at each other, confused but trusting. "Okay, sure," Malik said, "if it helps you." After they left, Carter sat in silence, staring at the sealed envelopes that now held his fate. The test would take 24 hours, but to him, it felt like a lifetime. That night, he found himself wandering the halls, stopping outside the guest house window. The twins were asleep. Marcus sprawled out. Malik curled on one side, clutching a worn photograph of their mother. Carter's throat tightened. He whispered through the glass, "I should have been there. I should have held you both when she was gone." The next morning, he was pacing the study when Grace entered holding an envelope. "Sir, it's here." His hand shook as he tore it open. The words blurred at first, his eyes welling up. Then, in bold black print, "Probability of paternal relationship, 99.98%. The room spun. Carter sank into his chair, covering his face as years of guilt and longing collapsed into tears. "They're mine," he whispered. "They're really mine." Grace's eyes softened. "Then you have a second chance, sir. Don't waste it." Carter nodded slowly, wiping his face. "I won't." That evening, as the twins sat on the porch watching the sunset, Carter approached them with the envelope in his hand. His heart pounded. "Boys," he began softly, voice trembling, "there's something you both deserve to know." The evening sky burned orange and violet over the Carter estate. The twins sat on the porch steps, sharing a bag of chips they'd found in the guest house pantry, laughing about whose jump shot was worse. For the first time in years, they felt safe, like maybe the world wasn't all cold concrete and hunger. Jonathan Carter stood a few feet away, holding the DNA results like they were made of fire. He'd spent hours rehearsing what to say, but every word vanished the moment he saw their smiles. How could he tell them that the man they'd called Sir was the same man who'd abandoned their mother before they were born? Malik noticed him first. "Hey, Mr. Carter, you okay? You look kinda pale." Carter tried to smile. "I'm fine, son." He caught himself again, his voice cracking. "Boys, can we talk inside?" The twins followed him into the sitting room. The fireplace glowed softly, throwing golden light across the room. Carter motioned for them to sit while he remained standing, his heart thundering in his chest. "I need you both to listen carefully," he began slowly. "There's something important I found out today. About your family, about who you are." The twins exchanged confused glances. Malik frowned. "Is this about that test thing you had us do?" Carter nodded. He could feel tears pressing behind his eyes. "Yes. That test wasn't just some medical check. It was a DNA test. I needed to know if what I suspected was true." Marcus leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Carter swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Your mother, Elena James, she and I, we were together once many years ago. I left her to chase business, thinking I'd come back when I'd made something of myself. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about you two. The twins froze. The room fell into complete silence, except for the faint crackle of the fire. Malik's eyes widened, his voice barely a whisper. You knew our mom? Carter nodded slowly. More than that. I loved her. And the tests? They confirmed it. Marcus blinked, disbelief washing over him. Confirmed what? Carter's eyes filled with tears as he whispered. That I'm your father. The world seemed to tilt. Malik stood up, shaking his head. Nah, that can't be real. You're a billionaire. We've been living under bridges. Why didn't you find us? Carter stepped forward, his voice breaking. I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know. If I had… Marcus cut him off, his fists clenched. But you left her. She died, man. You weren't there. Carter's eyes overflowed with tears. You're right. I wasn't. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. But if you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, I'll spend every day trying to make it right. The twins stared at him, torn between anger, grief, and something deeper. Hope. Finally, Malik's voice cracked as he whispered, We don't need your money, sir. We just needed a father. For a long moment, time seemed to stop. Malik and Marcus stood in Jonathan Carter's arms, tears soaking his tailored suit. The billionaire who once commanded boardrooms now trembled like a child, whispering the same words again and again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It wasn't the kind of apology you hear once and forget. It was the kind that came from years of buried guilt and love finally breaking free. Marcus's voice cracked. You really didn't know about us? Not even a little? Carter shook his head. If I had, nothing would have kept me from you. Your mother was everything good in my life. Losing her was the price I paid for my pride. Malik stepped back, wiping his face. She never said much about you. Just that you had a big dream and a bigger heart. Carter gave a broken laugh. She was kind to say that. Truth is, I had a big ego and small priorities. They all sat down, the fire flickering beside them. Grace quietly entered with tea, setting it down and leaving without a word, her eyes glistening too. Carter leaned forward, his voice softer now. I can't change the years you lost, but I can give you everything I have left. Education, a home, a future, whatever you want. Marcus shook his head. We don't need a mansion, sir. We just need to know this ain't temporary. Carter's eyes met theirs, steady and sincere. I promise you, it isn't. You're my sons, my blood. And I'll never let you go hungry, homeless, or forgotten again. For the first time, the twins smiled. Not the guarded smile of survival, but the genuine smile of belonging. Malik whispered, Guess God didn't forget about us after all. Carter chuckled softly. No, sons. He was just waiting for me to wake up. The following days passed like a dream. The guest house was replaced by rooms in the main mansion. New clothes replaced torn hoodies. Tutors came in, helping the boys catch up on schoolwork. But Carter made sure it wasn't about luxury. It was about healing. One night, as they sat around a fire pit outside, Marcus said quietly, You know, sometimes I miss the street. Not the cold or the hunger, just the feeling that we had each other's backs. Carter nodded. You'll always have that. Only difference now is, you've got me too. Malik smiled faintly. Then I guess we're 3 against the world. Carter looked at his sons, pride swelling in his chest. No, he said, his voice full of conviction. Now the world's got nothing against us. The stars shimmered above them like blessings. And for the first time in his life, Jonathan Carter didn't feel rich because of his money. He felt rich because of love. He didn't know it yet. But the next morning would bring something that would test that love in ways he never imagined. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight spilling over the marble floors. The faint hum of gardeners outside. The twins laughing over breakfast as Malik tried and failed to make pancakes without burning them. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. Jonathan Carter stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching his sons like a man afraid to blink, afraid the dream might vanish. He'd spent decades chasing success, but this watching, his boys joke and fight over syrup, was the kind of wealth he'd never known. Smells like smoke and pride in here, he teased. Marcus grinned. That's Malik's cooking, not mine. Malik threw a towel at him. At least I tried, Chef Microwave. Carter laughed, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But perfection rarely lasts long. The doorbell rang sharply. Grace appeared, her expression uneasy. Sir, the press is outside. Someone leaked the story. Carter's smile faded. Story? Yes, sir. About the wallet, the boys, and the DNA results. Marcus froze. DNA results? Like everyone knows? Grace nodded grimly. They're calling it the Billionaire's Lost Sons. Carter rubbed his temples, dread washing over him. The media didn't care about love or truth, only headlines. Within an hour, cameras crowded outside the gates, reporters shouting questions. How long were they homeless? Did you abandon them? Are they the real heirs to Carter Industries? The twins stood behind the window, stunned and frightened. Malik turned to Carter. Are we in trouble? Carter knelt beside them, gripping their shoulders. No, sons, you're not in trouble, I am. I should have protected you from this. By afternoon, the story had gone viral. Investors called, board members panicked, and the internet tore the story apart, half. The world praised Carter for reuniting with his children, while the other half accused him of being a fraud trying to fix his image. Through it all, Carter ignored the noise. That night, he gathered the twins in the living room. Listen, he said, voice firm but gentle. The world's going to talk. Let them. What matters is that we know who we are. Marcus frowned. But what if they say bad stuff about you? About Mom? Carter's eyes softened. Then we'll show them the truth by how we live, not by what we say. Malik hesitated. You sure we can handle all this? Carter smiled faintly. I've handled billions, but nothing ever meant more than handling this right. He hugged them close. We're a family now, and no storm, press, money, or lies can change that. Outside, the cameras flashed like lightning, but inside, the three of them stood together, unbroken. And while the world saw a scandal, they saw what it truly was. A second chance written by grace. The next few days turned into a storm. Everywhere the twins went, whispers followed. News vans parked outside the mansion gates. Drones buzzed overhead. And strangers yelled questions that cut deeper than knives. Are you really his kids or just lucky imposters? Did you plan this for money? Isn't this a publicity stunt? Malik and Marcus stopped going outside. Even the short walk to the garden felt like crossing a battlefield. Malik would glance at the tall iron gate, once a symbol of safety, now surrounded by flashing cameras. We didn't ask for this, he muttered. Jonathan Carter tried to shield them from it all. Canceled meetings, shut down interviews, and hired security. But the story had spread too far. Every headline twisted their truth. Homeless twins or con artists? Billionaire's sudden family raises questions. Carter's company stock began to fall. Board members grew nervous. Jonathan, one executive warned, this emotional distraction is costing millions. Maybe keep the boys out of sight for now. Carter's jaw tightened. They're my sons, not a mistake to hide. At night, he'd find Malik sitting by the window, staring at the city lights. You okay, champ? He'd ask. Malik would nod, but his voice would tremble. I just wish people saw what really happened. We didn't return your wallet for fame. We just wanted to do what was right. Marcus, the quieter one, had taken to writing. Pages filled with his thoughts, pain, hope, confusion. One night, Carter found a note Marcus had left on his desk. We were invisible when we were poor. Now everyone sees us, but not who we really are. That line broke him. The next morning, Carter called a press conference. The PR team begged him not to, but he was done hiding. He stood before flashing lights, the twins beside him, heads high, eyes filled with courage. I didn't find these boys, Carter began. They found me. When I lost my wallet, I thought it was an inconvenience. But when they returned it, I realized it was a blessing. They reminded me of something money can't buy. Honor, kindness, and heart. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. These are my sons, not because of DNA, but because of what's in their souls. And if that cost me everything I built, so be it. The room went silent. Cameras kept clicking. But the story changed that day. When the twins looked up at him, their eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were filled with pride. That night, they sat on the balcony, sharing hot cocoa, watching the stars. For the first time in weeks, they laughed again. Marcus whispered, Guess the world finally heard us. Malik smiled softly. Yeah, but even if they didn't, we'd still have each other. And for Jonathan Carter, that was worth more than any empire. Weeks passed, and the storm began to settle. The tabloids found new gossip, the cameras stopped flashing, and the mansion finally felt like a home again. But the twins hadn't forgotten the streets. Every night before bed, Malik and Marcus still prayed for the ones sleeping in the cold. One chilly Saturday morning, Malik came running into the study where Carter was reading. Dad, you gotta see this! Carter looked up, amused. What's got you so excited? Marcus followed behind, holding a laptop. Someone made a video about us, man. It's blowing up! On the screen was a short clip. Homeless twins return billionaires. Wallet, a story of kindness. Had millions of views, shared across the world. In the comments, people wrote things like, These boys restored my faith in humanity, and they deserve everything good that comes to them. Carter smiled. Looks like the world finally got the story right. Malik grinned. Yeah, but wait, look at this. He scrolled down to an email notification. It was from the Atlanta Community Foundation. The message read, "Inspired by the twins' story, hundreds of donors have contributed to create the Malik and Marcus Hope Fund, providing food, shelter, and education to homeless youth across Georgia." Marcus's mouth fell open. They named it after us? Carter nodded slowly, eyes glistening. You didn't just change my life, boys. You changed the city. Within days, the foundation officially launched. Reporters returned, but this time for the right reasons. The twins, wearing matching suits, stood beside Carter as he announced the fund's first shelter opening. In his speech, Carter said, "When I lost my wallet, I thought I'd misplaced money, but what I found were two hearts richer than gold. Their kindness lit a spark, and now, that spark is a beacon for those still in the dark." The crowd erupted in applause. Malik tried to smile, but tears rolled down his face. Marcus squeezed his hand. "We did it, bro." Mama would have been proud. Later that evening, back at home, Carter brought out a small wooden box. "I have something for you too." Inside were two engraved silver bracelets. One read faith, the other read honor. "These belong to my father," Carter said softly. "He taught me that real legacy isn't in what we own, but what we give. Now they belong to you." The twins looked at each other, speechless. Malik whispered, "We started with nothing, and ended up with everything that matters," Marcus finished. They hugged their father tightly, the kind of embrace that heals every wound the world ever left behind. Outside, the city glowed with lights, but for once, those lights weren't cold or distant. They were shining for them. A few months later, spring touched the city with warm light and blooming hope. But while the Carter mansion stood tall on the hill, Malik and Marcus often found their hearts drifting, back to the cold corners of the past, the alleys, the shelters, the hungry nights when dreams seemed too far to reach. One morning, Malik stood on the balcony, looking out over Atlanta. "You ever think about going back?" he asked softly. Marcus nodded. "Every day. Those streets made us who we are." Jonathan overheard them. He smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time we visit, not as survivors, but as messengers of hope." So they did. That afternoon, a sleek black van rolled quietly into the same downtown block where the twins once slept beneath a broken neon sign. They stepped out, not in rags this time, but in simple hoodies and sneakers. The people on the sidewalks barely noticed them until Malik knelt beside a homeless man, sleeping near a dumpster, and left a brown paper bag filled with food beside him. The man stirred, blinking up in confusion. Malik smiled. "It's okay, brother. You're not forgotten." Marcus walked a few feet ahead, greeting others, handing out blankets and sandwiches from the van. Soon, curious faces appeared from every corner. Men, women, kids with tired eyes. The twins didn't speak about wealth or fame. They just listened. They laughed with the old, hugged the scared, and shared stories of nights when they too had nothing. A local news crew spotted them and began filming quietly. But this time, the twins didn't run from the cameras. This story wasn't about exposure, it was about purpose. Jonathan watched from the van, his eyes wet. "They don't even realize it," he whispered to Grace. "They're healing others while healing themselves." Later, as the sun dipped low, Malik and Marcus stood at the alley where they'd once found Carter's wallet. The spot looked smaller now, but it still held the ghosts of who they'd been. Malik bent down, picked up a pebble, and placed it on the ground. "That's for every night we thought we wouldn't make it." Marcus added another. "And this one's for everyone still fighting to make it through." They clasped hands and whispered together, "We promise, we won't forget where we came from. Ever." Carter walked over and placed a third pebble beside theirs. "Then let's make it official," he said. "This place will become the first hope shelter, right here where our story began." Tears filled Malik's eyes. "The first of many?" Carter smiled. "As many as it takes." The twins looked around. The same cold streets that once broke them now felt like sacred ground. The wind blew softly through the alley, carrying laughter instead of sorrow. For the first time, the city didn't feel cruel. It felt alive. And beneath the fading sunset, the three of them stood hand in hand, father and sons, turning pain into purpose and loss into light. The night after the opening of the first hope shelter, the Carter mansion glowed softly under the moonlight. The event had been a success. Hundreds of people fed, dozens given beds, and hearts rekindled with faith. But as the house grew quiet, Malik couldn't sleep. He wandered into the study, where old boxes filled with family documents still sat unopened. Jonathan had been meaning to go through them with the twins someday, but life kept moving too fast. Tonight felt different. Marcus joined him, yawning. Can't sleep either. Malik shook his head. Nah, something's pulling me here. They started opening the boxes, old letters, faded photographs, yellowed papers. And then, at the very bottom of one box, wrapped carefully in a weathered handkerchief, was an envelope. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Malik froze. Marcus, he whispered. This is Mom's handwriting. The envelope was addressed to my boys, Malik and Marcus, for when you find your way home. Their hands trembled as they opened it. Inside was a folded letter, written years ago before she passed. Marcus began reading aloud, voice breaking as tears filled his eyes. My dear sons, if you are reading this, it means life has taken you through storms I couldn't protect you from. But listen to me, no storm lasts forever. Even in the darkest nights, remember who you are. You are kind, you are brave, and you are brothers. Never let the world turn your hearts cold. Someday you'll meet someone who sees you, not your clothes. Not your pain, but you. When that happens, be ready to forgive. That's how you'll find home again. I may not be there to hold your hands, but I'll be in every sunrise that warms your faces and every kind thing you do for others. Love always, Mama. By the time Marcus finished, both brothers were crying silently. Malik clutched the paper to his chest. She knew. She knew we'd find him. Carter had been standing quietly in the doorway. He stepped forward, voice barely steady. Your mother was the kindest woman I ever knew. We met when I volunteered at a shelter once. She told me she had twins who'd change the world someday. The room went still. Malik looked up, eyes wide. You knew her? Carter nodded slowly. We lost touch when I moved overseas. I never forgot her, or what she said. He touched the letter gently. Seems she was right. Marcus smiled through tears. She always was. That night, the letter was framed and placed on the wall above the fireplace. Permanent reminder of the woman whose love had guided them even after she was gone. As the fire crackled softly, Malik whispered, We finally made it home, Mama. And somewhere in that still night, they swore they could almost hear her voice. Soft and proud, carried by the wind. I told you, my boys, the world still has good hearts. A year later, Atlanta woke to a sunrise that painted the sky gold, a color that seemed to follow the Carter family. Wherever they went, the Hope Foundation had grown beyond anyone's dreams. Shelters stood in every major city across Georgia, each one bearing a simple sign, built on kindness. At the first shelter, the one built on the alley where it all began, a crowd gathered for its anniversary. Journalists, volunteers, and families filled the space. But at the center stood three people, Jonathan Carter, Malik, and Marcus. The twins had changed, but not in the way fame often changes people. Their clothes were cleaner, their faces brighter, but their humility remained untouched. Malik ran the youth outreach program, while Marcus handled education and mentorship. They worked tirelessly, often late into the night, making sure no one else had to feel invisible like they once did. As the crowd quieted, Carter stepped up to the podium. 1 year ago, he began, I dropped a wallet, and by the grace of two extraordinary young men, I found not just my lost property, but my lost purpose. He paused, looking toward his sons. Today isn't about money or legacy. It's about love, the kind that survives hunger, pain, and time. Applause echoed through the courtyard. Malik took the mic next. We were homeless once. We slept right here behind that dumpster. He pointed toward the back wall. We thought nobody cared, but one act of honesty changed everything. If there's anyone out there who's struggling, I just want to say, you're seen. You matter. Don't give up, Marcus added, his voice steady and proud. We can't choose where we start, but we can choose where we go next. And kindness. Kindness will always take you somewhere beautiful. Tears shimmered in the crowd. After the ceremony, the twins slipped away from the noise and stood at the edge of the alley. The air smelled like new beginnings. Malik picked up a pebble, the same kind they'd placed there a year ago, and smiled. Full circle, huh? Marcus nodded. Yeah, from sleeping here to saving here. Jonathan joined them, wrapping his arms around their shoulders. Your mother would have been proud beyond words. They stood together in silence as the city buzzed around them. Sirens, laughter, life. The same streets that once broke them now bore their names in stone. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Marcus whispered, We didn't just find a father, Malik. Malik smiled. No, we found a family. Carter's voice softened. And you gave me something greater than wealth. You gave me home. They turned toward the shelter, where a glowing sign read, The Hope House, founded by Malik and Marcus Carter. The lights flickered warmly like a heartbeat, and as the three of them walked back inside, hand in hand, hearts at peace, the world around them finally felt exactly as their mother had promised, still full of good hearts,